I never thought the last sound I'd hear on this earth would be my own heartbeat slowing down like a broken drum. But it happened. My name is Eleanor Matthews. I am 73 years old, and I died in a hospital in Savannah, Georgia. It started with a crushing weight in my chest, like someone had dropped a 200-pound stone right on me. My breaths grew shallow, sharp, desperate. I remember clutching the hospital blanket with white knuckles, my vision narrowing until all I could see was the fluorescent ceiling above me. Then, silence. No more pulse, no more breath, only stillness. But death was not the end. In fact, it was the beginning of something far more terrifying. I realized I was standing next to my own body. My skin was pale, tubes tangled around me, nurses rushing, alarms screaming, but none of it mattered. I wasn't in that bed anymore. Then I heard a voice. Strong, familiar, unmistakable. I turned, and there he was, Jesus. His presence filled the room like a rushing wind. Yet his gaze was steady, piercing, like he could see through every memory of my 73 years. And then he spoke the words that shook me to my core. At noon, darkness will cover the sky, and only one thing can save you. His voice wasn't like human speech. It was like thunder and whisper at once, echoing straight through my soul. I froze. What did he mean? Darkness at noon? How could that be? And what was the one thing that could save me? Questions swirled in my mind. But before I could speak, the world around me shifted. The hospital walls dissolved like mist, and I felt myself being pulled into a vision that would change everything. The moment the hospital walls dissolved, I felt like I was being pulled through a tunnel of rushing wind. My feet weren't touching the ground. Yet I wasn't afraid until I saw where I landed. I was floating high above Atlanta, a city I had visited years ago. Skyscrapers stretched toward the sky, glass windows glittering like diamonds in the noonday sun. The streets were alive with honking cars, food trucks serving lunch, and crowds of people walking fast, checking their phones. Everything looked so ordinary, so safe. But then it happened. Every clock, on buildings, on phones, on wrists, struck 12 noon at the exact same moment. And from a church steeple, a deep, haunting chime echoed through the city. It didn't sound like a normal bell. It sounded like a funeral bell, tolling for the living. Suddenly, the sun vanished, not dimmed, not hidden by clouds, gone. 1 second the city glowed with daylight. The next it was swallowed whole by darkness. This wasn't night. It was something else. The darkness felt alive. It pressed down on my skin like damp cloths. It smelled like rotting wood after a flood, mixed with the stench of smoke. I tried to breathe, but even without lungs, I felt like the air itself was strangling me. Panic exploded below. People screamed. Some stumbled into each other. Others froze where they stood. I saw drivers slamming brakes, cars colliding in sparks of metal. Parents clutched their children, running blindly through the black streets. The first reaction was instinct, light. People pulled out flashlights, lit candles, turned on phones, even car headlights, but it was useless. Every flame, every beam of light flickered for a split second, then vanished, devoured by the darkness as if it had never existed. A man lit a match, and before it could warm his fingers, it was snuffed out. It wasn't just the absence of light. This darkness consumed it. It swallowed not only vision, but hope. The sound of terror filled the air, sirens wailing, glass shattering, voices crying out in confusion. And through all of it, I felt something far more chilling than the fear of the crowd. The darkness was not just around them. It was moving, reaching, hunting. I clutched at my chest, realizing what I was seeing wasn't just disaster, it was prophecy. Joel chapter 2 verse 31 came crashing into my mind. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord. And I knew, I was being shown what is to come. But the vision wasn't over. The worst had yet to reveal itself. The longer I stared into that blackness, the more I realized it wasn't just darkness, it was alive. Then I heard it, a low, grinding sound, like the earth itself was splitting open. Cracks tore through the streets of Atlanta, jagged and deep. From them, shadows began to crawl out. They weren't human. They weren't even animal. They were shapeless masses of black. But their eyes, oh, their eyes glowed red like burning coals. They slithered and clawed, moving fast, hunting anything that breathed. I saw one creature leap across a sidewalk, snatching a man by the shoulders. He vanished into the darkness without a sound. Only a metallic clank of invisible chains dragging him away. The stench grew stronger, like rotting meat left out in the summer heat. The air was so thick it made even my spirit recoil. This wasn't just absence of light, it was a gateway. A doorway to hell itself. People ran blindly, but there was nowhere to hide. The shadows moved like smoke, slipping under doors, pouring into open windows. I saw families barricading themselves inside. Boards nailed across windows, but still I heard scratching, pounding, the shrieks of something inhuman. Then came the knock. At first it was gentle, like a neighbor asking for help. Then louder, more desperate. A woman's voice cried, "Please, let me in. I'm cold. I'm hurt." Another voice shouted, "It's me, your son. Don't leave me out here." Every instinct in me wanted to open that door. That was the cruelest part. The voices sounded so real, so familiar, but deep down, I knew they weren't human. They were tricks, tests. Some couldn't resist. I saw a man crack open his door just an inch. Instantly, a massive shadow lunged inside. His scream was short, cut off by silence. The darkness swallowed him whole. I felt my soul ache with grief. How could anyone endure this kind of test? To hear the voice of someone you love, begging for mercy, and still keep the door shut? Then a verse pierced my thoughts. Clear and undeniable. Exodus chapter 12 verse 22. Do not go out of your house until morning. It wasn't just history. It was instruction for this very moment. But as I watched, I realized the real enemy wasn't only outside. It was inside the human mind. The fear, the doubt, the temptation to disobey. That was where the darkness won its battles. And the night had only just begun. The knocking faded into the distance. But the terror did not stop. The ground beneath Atlanta shook with a violence that rattled the very air. I felt it in my bones. Even though I had no flesh left. The city moaned as if the earth itself were crying out. Then it happened, 3 deafening booms. Not like gunfire, not like thunder, but something far deeper, as if the universe itself were tearing apart. Each blast split the silence. And from the heavens came pillars of fire. But this was no ordinary fire. It was alive. The flames glowed blue with streaks of gold, twisting like rivers of molten glass. They roared as they fell, striking buildings with a force that turned steel and concrete into ash in seconds. Skyscrapers lit up like torches, crumbling to the ground in massive heaps. The sound was unbearable. Glass exploded, metal twisted. The cries of people filled the darkness. Some tried to run, but there was no escape. Entire blocks vanished in a heartbeat. I watched bridges collapse into rivers. Highways split wide open, cars sliding into gaping holes. The ground shuddered, vomiting smoke and fire. It felt as if the entire world was groaning under a weight it could no longer carry. And then came the waves. The ocean surged inland, miles beyond its usual reach. Walls of water rose up, crashing through coastal towns, homes, streets. Even entire neighborhoods disappeared under the flood. I saw mothers clutching their children, fathers grasping their families, only to be swept away in seconds. It reminded me of the news footage from hurricanes in recent years, New Orleans, Florida, even parts of Texas, but this was worse. This was not weather. This was judgment. The stench of smoke mixed with saltwater burned my throat, even though I had no lungs. The air grew hotter with each passing moment, suffocating. Everything humanity had built, roads, towers, monuments of pride, crumbled like sandcastles under a tide too fierce to resist. For a moment, despair washed over me. My soul ached, heavy with grief. I thought of my grandchildren, of families across America, of how fragile our lives are when measured against eternity. All the money, the houses, the retirement plans, none of it mattered when fire fell from the sky. Then, like lightning through my spirit, words from Scripture burned in my mind. 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 10. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire. And the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare. And I knew, I was seeing it unfold before my very eyes. The darkness had opened the doorway. The fire was the judgment. And the shaking earth groaned beneath the weight of it all. And yet, something told me this was not the end. Not yet. After the fire and the waves, the city was silent. But it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of death. I hovered above the ruins of Atlanta, and all I could hear was the wind whistling through collapsed towers and the faint cries of those left alive. Survivors huddled inside their homes, terrified to move. They had no power. Phones were dead slabs of glass. Radios silent. Darkness pressed against every window, every crack in the wall. No one dared light a candle. They had seen what happened to light, it was swallowed instantly. The first night was unbearable. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs. Thirst burned in their throats. The cold crept into their bones. But worse than all of this was the fear of what lurked outside. Then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, like the sound of someone breathing just beyond the wall. Then they grew louder, mocking, playful, cruel. Giggles like children echoed through the dark. Murmurs promised safety, coaxing people to step outside. Some resisted, others cracked. I saw one man press his ear to the wall, trembling. Another clutched his head, whispering prayers. A woman finally screamed, flinging her door wide open. For a moment, I thought she might run free. Instead, a shadow lunged in, and her voice was cut short. The darkness wasn't just outside. It was inside their minds. The silence, the whispers, the isolation, it tore people apart. Families argued, their love twisting into suspicion. Parents shouted at children. Brothers turned on brothers. I saw people clawing at walls, muttering nonsense, as if reason itself had been swallowed. It broke me to see it. These weren't strangers. They could have been my neighbors in Savannah, or the people I once sat beside in church. Decent, ordinary folks, now unraveling under a darkness too heavy to bear. The second night was worse. By then, hope had withered. I watched believers who once sang hymns with joy now trembling in corners. Fists raised against heaven. Some cursed God. Others, in their desperation, whispered to the darkness itself. Bargaining for relief, they promised anything for a flicker of light. It was then I understood the true horror. No stockpile of food, no shelter, no plan could save them. It wasn't the hunger that broke them. It was the absence of faith. Matthew chapter 24 verse 12 burned in my soul, because of the increase of wickedness. The love of most will grow cold. And oh, how cold it had grown. Not just outside their doors, but inside their hearts. The third night dragged on like an eternity. The darkness seemed endless, crushing, and still. The whispers mocked, the shadows waited, and human hearts faltered. And I realized, the test was not about survival of the body. It was about survival of the soul. On the third morning, when it seemed as though the darkness would never end, I saw it. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. A shimmer, so faint it was almost nothing, trembled on the far horizon. Slowly, the shimmer grew. Then, light, gentle, soft, but more powerful than the sun itself, poured into the black. It wasn't a harsh blaze. It was tender, like the first touch of spring after a brutal winter. The darkness shrieked. I could hear it, like glass shattering, like 1,000 nails scraping across stone. The shadows writhed, twisting, thrashing, trying to hold their ground. But they couldn't. The light pressed forward, steady and unstoppable. The shadow creatures screamed in agony. Their glowing eyes flickered and died. Their bodies shattered like brittle glass, dissolving into nothingness. The darkness that had ruled for 3 endless days melted away like frost under the morning sun. For the first time, I could breathe again. The air turned fresh, crisp, almost sweet. It filled me with hope so deep I nearly wept. But when the light finally revealed what was left, my breath caught in my throat. Atlanta was in ruins. Towers lay in heaps of steel and concrete. Streets yawned open with jagged cracks. Trees stood like blackened stumps against the sky. The ocean still churned, restless and violent. Yet, scattered across the devastation, I saw something I could hardly believe. Ordinary homes stood untouched. Their walls were firm, their roofs unscathed. Around them, grass sprouted green and flowers dared to bloom. Above each of these houses hovered a glow. It wasn't sunlight. It wasn't fire. It was something holy. Light that pulsed like a living flame. Golden and pure. I felt its warmth even from afar. It was a shield, a divine covering that no darkness could pierce. Inside those homes, I saw families, weak, hungry, weary, but their eyes were different. They weren't wide with panic. They weren't hollow with despair. Their eyes glowed with peace. Peace that defied the ruins around them. I whispered into the morning air, my voice breaking, "Why them? Lord, why were they spared when so many others were not? And deep inside, I felt the answer stir. I was close, so close to understanding the one thing Jesus had spoken of. As I stared at those untouched homes glowing with holy light, my heart trembled. How could they survive when everything else had crumbled? Why were they spared when entire cities fell into ruin? Then he appeared again, Jesus. His presence silenced the chaos around me. The air itself seemed to bow under his authority. His eyes, oceans of love and truth, met mine. And in that moment I felt every doubt burn away. He spoke, and his words seared into my very soul. Eleanor. It wasn't food that saved them. It wasn't candles, or strong walls, or secret plans. You saw with your own eyes. Every earthly thing was swallowed by the darkness. None of it could stand. They survived because they did one thing. They remained in me. The weight of those words nearly brought me to my knees. He continued. They trusted me when fear screamed at them. They obeyed when voices outside their doors begged them to betray my command. They clung to me, no matter what, and because they remained under my covering, the darkness could not touch them. I thought of John chapter 15 verse 4, a verse I had read so many times. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself, it must remain in the vine. But now, the verse was no longer ink on paper. It was alive, blazing like fire in my spirit. I understood then, this wasn't about survival kits or human wisdom. Stockpiles rot, candles flicker out, walls collapse. But those who remain in him, those who trust and obey without wavering, are shielded by a covering no darkness can break. Tears streamed down my face as his truth settled into me. All my life, I had tried to prepare in small, human ways, savings, plans, security, but in that holy moment, I knew none of it mattered compared to him. Jesus smiled, his face radiant with peace and power. Now you see, he said, now you must tell them. Warn them, Eleanor, not tomorrow, not someday, now, because when the clock strikes noon, only one thing will save them, remaining in me. And just like that, the vision began to fade. The brilliance dimmed, his figure dissolved into light. My soul ached to stay, but I felt a weight pulling me back. A crushing cold hit me, and suddenly, I was slammed into my body once more. My eyes flew open to blinding hospital lights. Machines beeped wildly. Doctors and nurses stared at me in shock. My heart had stopped for minutes. Yet I was alive again. I wasn't the same woman who had closed her eyes in Savannah. I had seen the truth, heard the warning, and carried it back like fire in my bones. And now, I cannot keep silent. Darkness is coming, but there is hope, one hope. Remain in him. Eleanor's journey reminds us that life is fragile. And all the things we cling to, money, security, even our best laid plans, can vanish in a moment. The vision she carried back was not a call to store more food or build stronger walls. It was a call to something deeper. The true preparation is not found in stockpiles but in the heart. Fear, doubt, and temptation will always knock at our doors, especially in dark times. But the lesson is clear. Remain in him. Trust in Jesus when everything else fails. Hold on to faith when the world screams at you to let go. For those of us in our later years, Eleanor's warning is a gift. It's a reminder that it's never too late to return to faith, to deepen trust, and to prepare not just for the storms of this life, but for eternity. The only light that cannot be swallowed by darkness is the light of Christ. And that light is offered freely to anyone who chooses to remain in him. If this story touched your heart, don't let it pass by in silence. Write, Amen, in the comments to show that you choose faith over fear. Share this video with a friend or family member who needs encouragement right now. And if you want to hear more real testimonies and messages of hope, subscribe to this channel. Together, we can walk in faith, prepare our hearts, and remind each other that no darkness is greater than the light of Christ.